If you've ever waited on someone who treated your patience like it would last forever, this is the story of the moment it finally ran out. You'll see exactly what pushed him to walk away for good, and why she never saw it coming until it was too late. Topic 1. The comfort trap. There's a quiet mistake almost every patient man makes without even realizing it. He confuses being available with being valued. He thinks that if he's always there, calm, understanding, ready to forgive, she'll naturally see how much he cares and love him even more for it. But relationships don't work like that. The human mind, whether we like it or not, places more value on what feels uncertain and less value on what feels guaranteed. And the moment someone becomes guaranteed, something strange happens. They start to disappear in plain sight. Think about it like a plant that never needs watering. At first, that sounds like a dream. No effort, no worry, no risk of it dying. But over time, you stop noticing it's even there. You walk past it every day without a single glance, because your attention naturally goes to the things that require care, that could wilt if ignored. That's exactly what happens when a man becomes too predictable in a relationship. Not because predictability is bad, but because it removes the small, healthy tension that keeps two people leaning toward each other, instead of settling into autopilot. This is where the trap closes in quietly. He starts adjusting his plans around her, lowering his expectations, accepting small disrespects as not a big deal, all in the name of keeping the peace. He tells himself this is what a mature, loving man does. And in some ways, he's right. But there's a fine line between being secure and being invisible, and most men cross it without noticing, because nobody warns them where that line actually is. And what happens the day they finally hit it? Topic 2. The invisible weight he carried. What people don't talk about enough is the quiet exhaustion of always being the one who holds things together. He was the one who stayed calm during the arguments, the one who reached out first after the silence, the one who found a way to laugh it off even when something actually hurt. From the outside, it looked like strength. On the inside, it felt like carrying a backpack that kept getting heavier, while everyone around him assumed it weighed nothing at all, because he never once put it down in front of her. This is the part most people miss about emotional labor. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it doesn't announce itself. It shows up in small moments, swallowing a comment that deserved to be said, choosing not to bring up something that bothered him because it's not worth the fight, texting first again even though it was her turn. Each one of these moments seems tiny on its own, like a single drop of water. But drops add up, and eventually, a man can find himself standing in water up to his chest, wondering how he got there, when really, he built that flood one quiet sacrifice at a time. The cruel irony is that the more invisible his effort became, the more he started to feel like a background character in his own relationship. Present, useful, reliable, but never truly seen. He kept telling himself that one day she'd notice, that patience would eventually be rewarded, that love this steady couldn't possibly go unnoticed forever. He didn't know yet that there's a difference between being needed and being appreciated, and that difference was about to become the most important lesson of his life. Topic 3. The signs she dismissed. Looking back, the signs weren't even subtle. They were just easy to ignore when you don't want to see them. There was the time he planned something special, and she canceled last minute for something that, in hindsight, wasn't even that important. There was the way she'd scroll through her phone while he was talking, nodding along without really listening, treating his words like background noise instead of something worth her full attention. None of these moments felt like a crisis on their own. That's exactly why they were so dangerous. This is the trap of death by 1,000 cuts in relationships. No single moment is big enough to justify walking away. So the moments just keep piling up, unaddressed, unspoken, slowly poisoning the connection from the inside. She wasn't a bad person, and that's important to understand. She simply got comfortable, the same way anyone gets comfortable when they believe a good thing will always be there, no matter how it's treated. Comfort has a way of dulling awareness, the same way familiarity dulls gratitude. You stop noticing the value of something the moment you stop imagining life without it. What she didn't realize is that every dismissed sign was actually a quiet test that life puts in front of every relationship. And every time she failed it without consequence, she was teaching him, little by little, exactly how much room he had to keep shrinking himself before she'd even notice. Somewhere along the way, he started keeping score, not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. And once a man starts keeping score like that, it's only a matter of time before the final number changes everything. Topic 4. The quiet shift inside him. There's a moment in every man's life that doesn't come with fireworks or a dramatic speech. It comes in silence, usually on an ordinary night, doing something completely unrelated to the relationship at all. Maybe he's driving home from work. Maybe he's lying awake staring at the ceiling, and out of nowhere, a thought arrives that he can't unthink. I'm tired. Not angry tired. Not the kind of tired that wants to slam a door or prove a point. Just a deep, settled kind of tired that comes from finally being honest with himself after a long time of pretending he wasn't. This shift rarely looks like what people expect. There's no yelling, no ultimatum, no dramatic confrontation where he lists every grievance he's been collecting. In fact, the most dangerous shift a man can go through is the calm one, the one where he stops feeling hurt and starts feeling clear. Hurt still hopes. Hurt still wants to fix things. Clarity, on the other hand, simply observes and accepts. And once a man crosses from hurt into clarity, something inside him closes a door that's incredibly difficult to reopen, even if he wanted to. What made this moment so powerful wasn't anger. It was the absence of it. He didn't need her to change anymore, and that's precisely what made the shift permanent instead of temporary. He'd spent so long hoping she'd finally see him, and somewhere in that quiet, unremarkable night, he stopped waiting for that to happen. He didn't decide to leave yet. He just stopped needing to stay. And once a man reaches that particular kind of peace, the next move isn't a choice anymore. It's just a matter of time before life shows him the door he already opened in his own mind. Topic 5. The disappearance without a fight. This is the part that confuses most people, especially the ones still operating on old relationship logic. He didn't slam any doors, didn't deliver a speech, didn't even raise his voice one final time to make sure she understood the weight of what was happening. He simply stopped. Stopped reaching out first. Stopped initiating plans. Stopped filling the silences that used to make her feel like everything was fine. And in that stillness, something far louder than any argument started speaking for him. People often think that walking away requires drama to be effective, but the opposite is usually true. A fight gives the other person something to push against, something to argue with, something to fix. Silence gives them nothing to hold on to at all. He wasn't punishing her. Punishment would have meant he still needed her to feel something specific. This was different. This was a man quietly removing himself from a story he no longer wanted to keep telling. The same way you'd close a book you already knew the ending to. Not out of anger, but out of acceptance that there was nothing left worth turning the page for. What made it so final wasn't a single decision. It was the absence of 1,000 small ones he used to make without thinking. No more good morning texts. No more checking in just to see how her day went. No more rearranging his schedule to make room for her last-minute changes. Each missing gesture was a sentence in a story she hadn't even realized was ending, until one day she looked around and the man who used to fill every gap simply wasn't there to fill them anymore. Topic 6. Her first reaction. Disbelief. The first thing she felt wasn't sadness. It was confusion. The kind that comes from a pattern breaking that you didn't even know you were relying on. She reached out the way she always did, expecting the familiar rhythm to kick back in. A quick reply, a little distance maybe, but eventually him coming around like he always had. That's the part she couldn't quite process at first. Not that he was upset, but that he wasn't reacting at all. No hurt tone, no lingering resentment to smooth over. Just quiet. And quiet, when you're used to someone always making the effort, feels louder than any argument ever could. This is the moment a lot of people misunderstand about emotional patterns. When something has worked the same way for a long time, the brain assumes it always will, right up until the second it doesn't. She texted again, maybe with a little more warmth than usual, the kind of message that used to instantly pull him back into place. And when that message sat there, seen but unanswered, or answered with something short and distant, something inside her started to shift. Not panic yet, just a small crack of disbelief, the kind that whispers, wait, is this actually different this time? What she didn't realize yet is that disbelief is rarely the end of the story. It's usually just the entrance to a much harder room. The mind has a strange way of protecting itself by assuming things will simply reset on their own, the same way they always have before. But patterns built on someone else's patience only hold up as long as that patience exists. And the moment she truly understood that his patience wasn't infinite after all, was the moment everything she'd been avoiding finally caught up to her all at once. Topic 7. The weight of realization. This is where things stopped being confusing and started being painful. Disbelief can protect you for a while, but eventually reality finds a way through, usually in a quiet, unremarkable moment that has nothing dramatic about it at all. Scrolling through old messages, passing a place that used to mean something, noticing how strange the silence feels where his voice used to be. And in that moment, she wasn't just missing him. She was starting to understand, piece by piece, everything she had taken for granted without ever truly seeing it. What made this realization so heavy wasn't just the loss of him. It was the loss of who she got to be around him. She'd never had to try particularly hard, never had to second-guess whether he'd still be there tomorrow, never had to face the version of herself that has to earn someone's presence instead of simply assuming it. That comfort, that certainty, had quietly become part of her identity. And now, without it, she wasn't just grieving a relationship. She was grieving a version of her own life that she didn't realize had an expiration date. This is the part of the story that hits hardest for anyone who's lived through something similar, on either side of it. Realization rarely arrives with a clear lesson attached. It arrives messy, late, and uninvited, forcing you to ask uncomfortable questions you spent a long time avoiding. Why didn't I notice sooner? Why did I assume he'd always be the one to come back? And underneath all of those questions sits the hardest one of all, the one that doesn't have a neat answer, only a long, quiet silence where the response used to be. Topic 8. What this reveals about value and distance. If there's one truth hiding underneath this entire story, it's this. People rarely leave because love disappeared. They leave because being seen disappeared first. Love can survive distance, mistakes, even long stretches of difficulty. What it struggles to survive is invisibility, the slow erosion of someone feeling like their presence actually matters to the person they've chosen. He didn't stop loving her the day he walked away. He stopped loving the way it felt to keep showing up for someone who'd forgotten how to show up back. This is a pattern that repeats far beyond just one relationship. It shows up in friendships, in families, even in how people treat opportunities they assume will always be available. The moment something feels permanent, the mind quietly stops protecting it, because protection is reserved for things we believe could be lost. That's not cruelty. That's human nature, wired by comfort and certainty. But understanding that wiring is exactly what separates the people who keep losing what matters most, from the people who finally learn to recognize value before it walks out the door for good. And maybe that's the real lesson buried inside a story like this. Not that she was careless or that he was a victim, but that distance has a way of teaching lessons that closeness never could. Sometimes you have to lose the version of comfort you never appreciated to finally understand what it was actually worth. The question this story leaves behind isn't really about him or her or even what happened between them. It's about something far closer to home. Something that quietly asks every person watching whether they're the one taking someone for granted right now, or the one finally tired enough to stop waiting to be seen. Conclusion. So here's the real question this story leaves you with. Not about him, not about her, but about you. Are you the one quietly disappearing inside your own relationship right now? Telling yourself it's patience when it's actually erasure? Are you waiting for someone to finally notice your worth on their own, when deep down you already know that waiting has never once changed how someone treats you? Real change doesn't come from hoping harder. It comes from the moment you decide your presence has a price, and you stop handing it out for free. If anything in this video felt familiar, don't just nod and scroll away like you've done 100 times before. Ask yourself tonight, where am I shrinking myself just to keep the peace? Where have I confused being available with being valued? And what would actually change in your life, your relationships, your confidence, the way people treat you, if you simply stopped being so easy to take for granted? That answer matters more than anything you've watched today, because knowledge without action is just another comfortable trap, the same kind this entire story warned you about. If this hit something real in you, do yourself a favor. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because this is exactly the kind of clarity we dive into here, week after week. The patterns, the blind spots, the quiet truths that most people never get told until it's too late. Don't let this be just another video you watched and forgot. Let it be the moment you started paying attention to your own worth, before someone else's silence has to teach you the same lesson he just learned.